Get some!
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Accuses with you guys, and a whole bunch of wonderful folks, because already we have signups. Jimmy CSXT and Katie Ross 729 already on our website, tyt.com, signing up and giving contributions, which we definitely need. Unfortunately, another digital media company has gone under today, Deadspin. So they're just, they're dropping like flies.
Jesus.
And we are one of the very few left. So if ever there was a time to do a contribution or a membership, this is it, tyt.com/join. All right, but we have an amazing show for you guys, including some Trump supporters going to jail, others turning evidence, all of that right in the beginning, let alone Israel, let alone later in the show, where we always have some fun stories for you guys. All right, Anna.
Well, we begin with the story that just broke right before airtime, and it has to do with someone who was close to Trump and knows quite a bit about the classified document scandal that Trump is now facing criminal charges for. Let's get to it.
What happened is Walt left before me, and he never goes directly to the plane. He's either in the motorcade or when he goes there with the boss, which the former president. I left Mar-a-Lago, I texted him, hey, I'm on my way. He followed me, he pulled out and got behind me. We got to the airport. I ended up loading all the luggage I had, and he had a bunch of boxes.
You noticed that he had boxes?
Oh yeah, they were the boxes that were in the indictment. The white banker's boxes. That's what I remember loading.
That was Brian Butler, a longtime Mar-a-Lago employee who is described as a central witness in the case involving Trump's handling of classified documents. And now he's speaking out, and he doesn't believe that the case against Donald Trump and the co-conspirators in that case amounts to a so-called witch hunt, something that Donald Trump has been alleging. Now, Butler is referenced as Trump employee number 5 several times in the classified documents indictment, which is being prosecuted by special counsel Jack Smith. Now, before I get to more on Butler, Cenk, I wanted to bring you in because we've heard various stories about co-conspirators taking plea deals, coming out, cooperating with prosecutors, and essentially speaking out against Donald Trump. I haven't seen any of them do an interview quite like Butler has, and so he felt the need to come out and just kind of clear his name before the public and let them know about his cooperation in this case.
Yeah, so I think the central question in the entire election is, are enough independents going to believe that Donald Trump is a bona fide criminal and hence they cannot vote for him? And this story has a lot to do with that, because this guy is very credible, but are they going to listen? That's the issue. And I don't want to ignore the obvious, the elephant in the room here. Brian Butler is obviously the doppelganger for Brian Stelter.
No, don't do that. Don't do that to poor Stelter, Jesus Christ.
No, okay, look, whatever, I live in the biggest glass house there is. Anyway, just kidding, but back to the importance of the story, for sure, because if you believe this guy, then Donald Trump is not just a criminal, but a bit of a dangerous criminal. If you don't believe him, I don't know what you do believe. Do you believe in objective reality? I don't know, let's find out.
So first, let's get to know Butler a little better. Who is he and what kind of relationship did he have with Donald Trump? He actually worked at Mar-a-Lago for decades. Butler gave testimony to federal investigators that informed crucial portions of last year's criminal obstruction charges against Trump and his 2 co-defendants, Walt Nauta, and personal aide to Trump, who was a personal aide to Trump, and Carlos de Oliveira, a property manager at Mar-a-Lago, who had been Butler's closest friend until recently. The 2 are no longer speaking. The 2 also decided to take 2 completely different paths in how they are handling this case, with Butler deciding to have his own non-Trump attorneys representing him, and with de Oliveira kind of going in the listen to Trump, do what Trump says and what his lawyers want route. So obviously very different. Now, Butler, who was employed at Mar-a-Lago for 20 years, has spoken repeatedly with investigators, according to CNN, paying for his own attorney and breaking with the orbit around Trump that he knows so well. Now, Butler told CNN that he unknowingly helped Nada deliver boxes of classified information from Mar-a-Lago to the former president's plane in June of 2022, the same day that Trump and his attorney were meeting with the Justice Department at Mar-a-Lago about the classified documents, right? So he's gonna meet with the Justice Department at Mar-a-Lago about the classified documents. On that same day, according to Butler, Trump is moving documents around. And that day, on June 3rd, specifically of 2022, Butler received what he remembers as a strange request from Nada, that's the way that he describes it, who wanted to know if he could borrow an Escalade from the car service that Butler ran for Mar-a-Lago. Trump and his family were apparently about to fly to New Jersey that day for the summer. And it was typically Butler and his valets who handled getting their luggage onto the plane. And so it was an unusual request by Nada, according to Butler, for the car, because Nada typically did not handle moving luggage and asked Butler for the car in a weird, guarded way. That is what Butler is saying. Butler says that Nada and de Oliveira loaded up the vehicle before driving it to West Palm Beach Airport. Butler arrived with his car, or his own car, filled with Trump's family luggage. And then he helped Nada load Trump's plane with the luggage, as well as bankers' boxes of documents that were in the Escalade. So Butler says that he didn't realize what was in those banker boxes, and he's about to address that in the next clip. Let's watch.
And did you have any idea at the time that there was potentially US national security secrets in those boxes?
No clue. No, I had no clue. I mean, we were just taking them out of the Escalade, piling them up. I remember they were all stacked on top of each other, and then we're lifting them up to the pilots.
How many boxes was it?
You know, they asked me in the interview, and I believe it was 10 to 15.
And when you look back on that now, what do you?
Well, I had no clue until probably the end of June. There was a few different things that happened that kind of opened my eyes to, something's going on here.
So you get that unusual request. Did you ever think to yourself, why were there so many boxes at Mar-a-Lago?
For me, I'm just thinking, the former president, he has a lot of stuff he likes to lug around with him.
So look, obviously Butler has an interest in everything that he is saying there, meaning he wants the public to be under the perception that he, yes, helped to move those boxes, but he didn't know what those boxes contained. This is definitely helping him potentially turn public opinion in his favor. And I don't know whether or not to trust what he is saying about his own involvement, Cenk, but it is very clear that he's coming out to make a distinction between himself and the two other co-conspirators, Nada and de Oliveira, in regard to how those documents were handled and what the individuals knew about what was in those bankers' boxes.
Yeah, so you have to be able to separate out what you think of the person overall and what you think of what they're saying right now. So for example, Brian Butler worked with Donald Trump for over 20 years at Mar-a-Lago. So some of you might then say, well then, okay, I don't trust him because it's not like Trump became a bad guy overnight. He's been a terrible person this whole time, and meanwhile this guy's been working with him, etc. You can say, well, look, he didn't stand up for his friends. They were all willing to lie to the federal law enforcement, etc. But he kind of threw them under the bus by not lying along with them, and maybe he's trying to protect himself, etc. I understand all that, but that's not really relevant to us in terms of other than how it informs the question of is he telling the truth today, right? So he could be a terrible guy, he could be an angel, but I don't care about that. I care about this. So how do you know if he's telling the truth or not? Number one, everything he says matches along with the testimony that you see from the others. So they talk about, you see the pictures of people moving boxes. He says they were moving boxes, same day, right? They have an account of trying to erase the tape at Mar-a-Lago that has been corroborated by one of the other witnesses, and the others are denying, but have no factual basis to say it didn't happen. They acknowledge they talked on that day. They tried to go after the tape that day, but they were saying for innocent reasons, etc.
Right.
So my point is, Here's a guy who definitely knows Trump and is in his inner circle. He's not some rando that walked by and the deep state recruited him, etc. Right? Number two is his story matches all of the other stories, and if you think, well, they were all acting fishy and trying to erase the tape at Mar-a-Lago for innocent reasons, that seems a lot less likely. Okay, and so if you're on that side and you're gonna believe whatever Trump says, okay, there's nothing I can do to help you anyway. But if you're on the side of, hey, I'm not interested in politicizing this, I'm not interested in Trump is guilty because I don't like him, Trump is innocent because I do like him, but I just wanna know what actually happened.
Right.
His story is enormously credible. He's saying it, matching every other story and explaining in a very logical way why he would care. And one of the things that he says, and I take this with there's two parts of this. He says about Anthony Pratt, the Australian businessman, a really wealthy businessman, that Trump told a secret about the Russian submarines to, and about their nukes, which is one of the top secrets we have in America. Butler says he overheard that, and then he thought, oh my God, this guy's sharing top secret information because he wants people to be members at Mar-a-Lago. And that's crazy.
Quite a perk for membership.
Yeah, and that's really, really bad. Now you could say, no, I don't believe him. I think that he's saying that he's outraged today, but only because the FBI raided his house and he's worried about himself. I don't know. I don't know if he was genuinely outraged or not genuinely outraged. But is it true, the story that he's conveying? Yeah, because we have it confirmed by Pratt and others.
Right.
So, and now why do you think Trump's telling Pratt about it? One, you could say, yeah, he's got verbal diarrhea. Well, number one, we probably shouldn't have a president who can't keep his mouth shut about our classified information, let alone taking it home, let alone, by the way, the boxes they loaded on and went to New Jersey, we never got back.
Right.
So where the hell is he hiding those? But especially if you believe he's doing it just to get the $200,000 membership from all these guys, it makes it extra odious. But either way, deeply illegal and should not have happened. He shouldn't have told Pratt, he shouldn't have taken those boxes from the White House, and he shouldn't still be hiding those boxes.
It's so crazy because what stands out to me about this case more than anything is how Trump had so many opportunities to just hand over the documents and no one's gonna prosecute him, right? Just, we know you have the documents. Okay, he hands over some boxes. Are these all the documents? Yes, these are all the documents. I handed everything over. Oh God, no, they're not all the documents. You're still holding on to more. Like, he can't help himself. He is his own, Trump is his own worst enemy, both rhetorically because he can't keep his mouth shut, but also through his own actions. Even when he's given a long leash, when he's told by federal authorities, listen, this will all be over as soon as you hand over the documents, and he still, again, can't help himself. He can't hand over those documents for whatever reason, and it just makes no sense to me.
Look, there's gradations of Republicans and even of MAGA. But if you're in the deep end of MAGA and you think that Trump is untouchable, then you're not gonna care about any of this, right? But for those of you that are not at the deep end, guys, if you're part of MAGA or you're a Republican, aren't you super frustrated that he keeps hurting your cause?
I'd lose my mind.
Yeah, like, okay, let's say you think he's being targeted. In that scenario, he should be even more careful because then they're gonna smear not just him, but you guys and the entire movement. But instead of being careful, he's like, I'm gonna grab/steal a bunch of documents from the White House. And after I get caught and they ask me for the documents, at that point, if I'm MAGA, I'm like, oh, for God's sake, just give back the documents. If you give back the documents, they're not gonna be able to charge you. Even if they charged you, that's gonna be easily dismissed. Everybody's gonna say, brother, you asked for the documents, he gave it back. What else do you want,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
And that's the same thing Biden did. That's the same thing Mike Pence did. They asked for the documents, you give it back. There's no case there. But he refuses, he didn't do it then. He didn't do it the second time around. He had his lawyers lie. He had all the people that work at Mar-a-Lago lie. He had them try to erase the tape.
Yep.
And he's still holding on to boxes. The guy's like, if you're MAGA, you should be 10 times more upset at Trump than we are because he's absolutely destroying your cause.
So a few other claims by Butler in these CNN interviews. So apparently Butler was also a witness in the room while Trump was having several conversations on basically how De Oliveira and Nada should skirt federal authorities. So De Oliveira told Butler, for instance, about Nada traveling to Palm Beach in late June of 2022, at a time when Nada and De Oliveira were allegedly interested in deleting surveillance tapes of a storage room where the boxes had been kept at the club, according to the indictment. Butler recalls that De Oliveira, remember, De Oliveira was a really close friend of his. So this whole debacle has destroyed their friendship, but he was very, very close with him. They lived very close to one another. It seems like in the same gated community. But I wanted to give you that context so you understand the close relationship the two had. Now, Butler recalls that De Oliveira told him that Nada would be visiting. Then a day later, De Oliveira warned Butler that Nada's visit should be kept secret. De Oliveira told Butler that Nada was interested in learning about how surveillance footage from the club would be saved. Another oddity to Butler, he says. So to him, it was pretty clear that they were looking to tamper with evidence and attempt to erase the surveillance.
Yeah.
De Oliveira, by the way, has been charged with lying to federal investigators who accuse him of repeatedly denying seeing or knowing anything about the boxes of documents at Mar-a-Lago, despite personally moving them himself. He has pleaded not guilty. And in regard to any statements from any of the others involved in this case, no one wanted to give CNN a statement except for an attorney representing De Oliveira, John Irving, who said in a statement, quote, "We look forward to hearing more about Mr. Butler's version of events when he is under oath and subject to penalty of perjury in the courtroom where that belongs, and we decline to try this case in the media." I'm looking forward to his testimony along with the testimony of others in this case as well, if it gets to that point.
Oh, 100%. So I'll end on the last couple of things that you just mentioned there. Number one, I'm looking forward to Donald Trump's testimony because Donald Trump could easily make, well, not in this case, but in the other case, well, I love his testimony in this case too. Why were you trying to erase the tape? What's in the boxes? Where are they? In New Jersey, my guess is he will not testify. In the January 6th trial, the one in Georgia and then the federal one as well, I'm really looking forward to his testimony because MAGA, you should be looking forward to it more than anyone because if he proves that the election was stolen, he's not guilty in those cases. Period, the cases are over, right? So I'm sure you're all on pins and needles waiting for him to prove it because they have all the evidence, right? You know too that he doesn't have any evidence. Okay, now back to Butler. Look, guys, I want to be super clear here. He didn't say, I know what was on the tapes and I know they were trying to erase it. He just said they were looking into saving or erasing and it was really weird. It was very unusual. We don't normally talk about saving or deleting these tapes.
Right.
So we're not saying that he has a smoking gun on Trump coming to him and saying, erase the tapes, they have illegal material on them. No, he's giving you context for it. But it is persuasive to me because why are you talking about saving or deleting the tapes when you never ever talk about it? So it is interesting testimony. And finally, the other thing that I found persuasive about Butler was, he said, look, guys, Trump, if you're working with him and it's outside of politics, et cetera, none of these issues ever come up. You know, he seems like he got along really well with Trump, and De Oliveira was his best friend, and they loved working at Mar-a-Lago, and he started working there when he was a really young guy, and he built a business around it and stuff. So it's not like he hates Trump at all.
He's in his like early 40s.
Yeah, and he's been working there for 20 years, so he started out super young there. But he said one of the things that soured him on Trump here at the end is that he always asked other people to sacrifice themselves, like Butler's friends, De Oliveira and Nada, et cetera. And he's like, but he knows. He said, Butler says, I know that Trump knows that he did it, and I know that he's lying about this whole thing being a witch hunt. And it might not ruin his life, but he's going to ruin these guys' lives.
I mean, he certainly already has ruined the lives of others who were willing to carry out what Trump had asked of them, right? I mean, for some reason, I think of Jenna Ellis first because Jenna Ellis is so bitter about the fact that she's been indicted in the election interference case. And she really only has herself to blame. I mean, it's hard to believe that after losing literally dozens of court cases, she was still under the impression that the election had been stolen from Trump. But all of these people are facing criminal indictments. You have former friends and personal lawyers of Donald Trump already serving time in prison. Michael Cohen's a good example. We're gonna do a story later about another former Trump advisor, Peter Navarro, who's gonna spend some time in prison very soon. It's just, It's amazing to me how people keep falling for Trump's lies and keep carrying out Trump's terrible deeds. Trump usually skirts any punishment while they suffer the consequences.
And there's a very good reason for that, because Donald Trump is actually among the elites. And so the elites get extra privileges, extra protections, including Merrick Garland and all those prosecutors waiting 2.5 years to charge him because they thought if he doesn't run again, he's part of the elite, so we'll protect him.
Jesus.
And so, but Nauta and de Oliveira and Butler and all these guys, they're not part of the elites. So they're just cannon fodder. And so Butler is objecting to that. And I would hope that at least if you believe them, that you would object to it too, that Trump treats people like this. I remember how mad I was at Clinton for how he treated Monica Lewinsky, right? It showed you his character, that he was willing to smear her and throw her under the bus, even though he knew he was lying. And the same is true of Donald Trump here. So many people go to prison, so many people have their lives ruined just so Donald Trump can lie to protect himself.
And people who admired him, like people who looked up to him and believed in what he was doing. I mean, it's crazy. Anyway, we have that Peter Navarro story coming up after the break. He is gonna spend time behind bars, so we'll do a refresher on why and how his appeal is very unlikely to work. Come right back.
Your all-time favorite president, me.
Document.
Back on TYT. First, shout out to all the wonderful people who just joined on TYT.com. That's Boingo Chick 79 and Raphael Horowitz. You guys are awesome. We appreciate you so much. So let me go to those same members on TYT.com. Louis Cypher says turned a grateful 59 yesterday. Happy birthday, brother. I read your comments often. You're part of the family. Patience says, how do we get Katie Porter to run a last-minute campaign against Biden? The establishment continues to keep her down. She needs to just take on Biden and win on a progressive agenda. I'm so nervous Biden can't beat Trump with the Electoral College. Well, you're very right to be nervous, but it's too late. It's definitively too late. And so I got asked that on Brianna Joy Gray's podcast today, Bad Faith, about Rashida Tlaib. Why doesn't she run now? Guys, it's way too late. So when I started doing it 5 months ago, it was borderline too late. Now it's 5 months past too late. So I hear you, and I have the same kind of longing, but it's not possible. You would have had to have registered in all those states, and they didn't. So, and trust me, then mainstream media would tear them to shreds. There'd be nothing left of them. Michael Napian said, Anna's looking very dapper in her vest. Teddy Cool says, the iconic white jacket. I just know this show will be great.
Ooh, it's iconic.
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
I said something similar right before the show. I agree with you guys, iconic. Okay, ACGC writes in, Trump literally stole from the Wizard of Oz with a don't look behind the curtain move. It is quite literal in this case. It was behind a curtain in the ballroom, let alone the bathrooms of Mar-a-Lago. Art Guy says, call me an optimist, but I think TYT will weather this storm of failing media companies thanks to their dedication to truth and loyalty of the members. Well, I agree with you. I think that we're going to make it out, but it's not a foregone conclusion, and we can't do that without your help. So the loyalty of the members is everything, because that's the only thing that can carry us out of the storm. Now, like I said, Deadspin down today, Rooster Teeth down at the end of last week. We told you ahead of time that everything was collapsing, and then you see we were right. you see the collapses right in front of you, right? So keep us up, keep us stable, and because we do this show with you. That's our hidden advantage, that's our secret advantage, and others haven't figured it out. They keep relying exclusively on advertisers. Super Ken 1 says, I'm donating $50 for every pound I lost last year working out to TYT and TDR. My 20 pounds lost will hopefully keep my only trusted news network alive and well. I mean, that's what I call a win-win. Thank you, Ken. Back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and all these wonderful members with you guys. Let me do quick shout outs. Ethan Rexer gifted a sub on Twitch, and Itchy Brother Dragon gifted 10. You're amazing, thank you. And then on YouTube, Lynn's gifted 1, Moondragon gifted 20. Amazing. And Parker Sandor, Thomas Cunningham, Ben Barnumd, Mia Ardell, and Clayton Anderson all just joined. And we appreciate you guys. You are the Young Turks.
We're waiting on you, the wiener. I'm just kidding, but that is one of our viewers. I don't know, just want to give you a shout out.
Okay, look at that. All right, we do the show together, guys. Much love to all the new members. Now you're part of the community. All right, Anna.
All right, well, we have some more news in the Trump-related legal arena, so let's get into it. Former White House trade advisor Peter Navarro has just a little over 1 week of freedom left as he's officially been ordered to report to federal prison next week. Now, Navarro faces the prospect of becoming the first top Trump advisor to serve time in a jail for an offense related to the efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. In a court filing released just yesterday, a statement said that Dr. Navarro has now been ordered to report to the custody of the Bureau of Prisons, FCI Miami, on or before 2 p.m. Eastern time on March 19th of 2024. Navarro's attorney said in a court filing referring to a low security prison in Florida. Now, Navarro was sentenced earlier to 4 months in prison after being convicted on 2 contempt of Congress counts. Now, he refused to comply with a subpoena from the House Select Committee that was investigating the January 6th Capitol riots, and he's been trying to avoid reporting to prison during his appeal. He is in fact appealing the case and the conviction that he has been found guilty of, but his efforts so far have failed. So US District Judge Amit Mata ordered him last month to report to prison after he denied his bid to stay free, or after the judge denied his bid to stay free as the appeal plays out in court. And so the DC Circuit Court of Appeals is considering a similar request from Navarro, but as of now, he will have to report to prison. Navarro is arguing that Meta's decision to not let him raise an executive privilege defense at trial was wrong, and that the possibility that the DC Circuit Court of Appeals might reverse that decision should keep him out of prison as the court weighs his case. Now, the reason why the judge wasn't hearing the executive privilege defense is because that wasn't a just defense in this case. So Navarro was trying to argue that, well, Trump told me not to cooperate with Congress, and so I did as I was told. And that was the president. I must listen to the executive and do as I'm told. But that's not a defense in this case as the trial played out. So I've got more details, but Cenk, any thoughts?
Yeah, so look, what all the Trump guys are finding out is that all the nonsense they spew in media just doesn't work in court. So is there a complicated issue around executive privilege? Yes, there is. It's not clear cut, and you'll see both sides always, depending on who's the president, saying, we have complete power to deny you any conversation we had and access to that conversation, et cetera. And the other side will say, you have no power. And they'll keep flip-flopping my whole life based on which party's in power, right? And it's super frustrating. But there are real guidelines, there are real rules. And in this case, Trump didn't even apply executive privilege.
Exactly, yes.
So, and certainly Biden didn't. So it's a total fiction what Navarro's saying. So when you go into court and you say, hey, the president used executive privilege with me, and then the judge says, okay, where? Show me where he.
Show me the evidence.
Show me the evidence for Trump saying that you have executive privilege over this, and he doesn't have it.
Right.
So, but then he's totally like undeterred by that. Goes in front of the cameras right outside and goes, "Oh no, I had executive privilege." But if you did, we just asked you for the evidence,
right,
and you're about to go to jail, son, right?
Right.
And you didn't have the evidence because it doesn't exist. But he still comes out there with this chitter chatter of, oh my God, I'm a victim and I'm a martyr and all this stuff. And part of the reason he does that because he knows with his base, that'll work like a charm. You just pretend to be a martyr and never present evidence. That's MAGA 101. So it'll work with them, but he's going to prison because it doesn't work in court.
Now, Cenk, I love that you mentioned the press conferences that he tried to carry out and what he was allegedly saying during those press conferences. I remember watching some of those videos on this show, and to be honest with you, the message was lost because there was a lot going on during those press conferences. And if you guys don't remember what I'm referring to, here's a little refresher.
Several of these fine attorneys behind me say a few words, but
you gotta talk?
Please stop. Please stop. Please stop.
this is what's wrong with America here. Who's this? Come on.
Bro, you're already facing charges.
Yeah, I get it.
Go ahead and commit a crime.
So,
I've been sitting here this whole time, situational awareness.
yes, okay. Hopefully free speech will.
DNC don't like fascists. DNC don't like fascists.
So forgive me for losing any focus on whatever message he had during those press conferences.
Yeah, well, all he ever did was in the press conferences was lie, so you didn't miss much.
Right.
So look, I think it's a fine line on how you protest, and some people to this day are arguing you should go to people's house and try to make them afraid. Don't do that, okay? But when you have a person in power who's lying to people, and he's in a public space, and you're in a public space, there's nothing wrong with that form of protest, especially because people in power never allow you to have access to them, right? So unless you're paying them a giant amount of money in campaign contributions, the regular person is never going to get a chance to meet with Trump or Biden or any of their staffers. So if this is a form of protest you're doing, and by the way, on a much more serious note, when they're doing protests of Biden and his administration over Gaza, and it's people on the left doing that, I'm also in favor of that. So there is a right time and place, and this is the right time and place.
Right, yes. But again, the same lesson that we can learn from the various Mar-a-Lago employees who carried out, what Trump wanted them to do and moving around classified documents, and now they're facing charges themselves. You can say the same thing about Peter Navarro carrying out what Trump demanded of him, right? Trump usually is able to skirt consequences, although to be fair, he is for the first time facing some serious charges in multiple criminal cases. But you have all these other people who were associated with Trump having already been charged, already convicted, already sentenced to time behind bars. Again, you have those Mar-a-Lago employees when it comes to the classified documents. Here you have Peter Navarro, who's gonna spend time behind bars because he listened to Trump and refused to respond to that congressional subpoena for the January 6th investigation. Maybe don't break the law. Maybe don't listen to what Trump wants you to do and instead do what you think is going to prevent criminal charges for you. And these guys aren't smart enough to realize that. It's amazing.
Yeah, but there is a distinction between the Oliveras and the Nautas, who are just employees of Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and the Peter Navarros, because those guys just got caught up in Trump's criminality, and they got stuck in a situation where they're loyal to Trump, their salary comes from Trump, etc. But they're a civilian, they're a regular person, and they're caught up in this mess. Whereas Navarro is one of the authors of this mess. He's one of the principal characters in this play. He's the one that wrote a book and bragged about how they were going to try to steal the election. He didn't say steal in the book, but everything he outlined was the fake elector plot, which was an attempt to steal the election and do a coup against America. So he's a flagrant violator of our Constitution, our laws, etc. He's one of the principal bad guys. So to see him go to jail for anything is a relief. He should also be charged with insurrection. Don't do it like they did with Trump. Afterwards, oh, let's take him off the ballot, etc. No, do an actual trial where you try him for the thing that he did. This is just contempt of Congress.
Right.
Charge him on the substance of the fake elector plot, the insurrection. And I wish that they would actually prove it in a court of law against some of these conspirators.
Well, let's move on to some other news today, including, well, a freshman Alabama senator who wasn't quite honest in her response to the State of the Union.
President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable.
She embarrassed herself, she embarrassed the Republicans, and she embarrassed women.
Did you mean to give the impression that this horrible story happened on President Biden's watch?
Freshman Alabama Senator Katie Britt is facing a ton of backlash and allegations of dishonesty over her response to President Joe Biden's State of the Union address just last week. Now, she was even forced to defend herself during a contentious interview on Fox News. We're gonna get to that in just a moment, and you don't wanna miss it. But before we do, more on the portion of her speech that is getting all of this negative attention. Now, Britt's State of the Union response included some fear-mongering tactics about Joe Biden's presidency and what he has failed to do in keeping the country safe with the southern border being wide open. You know, that was the main point that she wanted to outline. She wanted to make it seem as though there's a looming threat of rape and sex trafficking because the border is out of control. And so she shared a very specific story while trying to make this point about a woman who she met at the southern border named Carla Jacinto. So here is the portion of the speech where she addresses her story.
I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12. The cartels put her on a mattress in a shoebox of a room, and they sent men through that door over and over again for hours and hours on end.
What are we doing? Like, look, what she's sharing is obviously very serious, although she doesn't get the facts right, and I'll tell you why and how in just a moment. But the delivery, like what are we doing?
Yeah, you know, look, I'm of two minds on that. So especially that part that you just saw. So obviously over the top BS emotional, right? You could be moved by that story, and I hope that you are moved by that story. The core of that story is true. It's not, it just doesn't happen to be about Biden's term, but she's obviously an enormous phony pretending to get all emotional, and as she rehearsed that many times. But I have to confess that I'm a little surprised that she's getting so much heat for that, because politicians have been giant phonies just like her my entire life.
You're right about that. You're totally right about that. But her delivery, it like slaps you across the face with how inauthentic she is and how she is exploiting a tragic event for political advantages.
Yeah,
that's what really, because what happened was awful and brutal and tragic, right? It's the fact that that story is being utilized as a tool for the right wing, politically speaking, and you can't help but acknowledge the fact that it's being exploited as a political tool because of her inauthentic delivery.
Yeah, but yeah, I find a silver lining in this story. You might be surprised by that. So first, look, don't get me wrong. I did a play-by-play here for our members, and if you sign up for membership, you could actually still watch it. And I have to confess, it was a bit hilarious, right? Because I started playing along with her because she was so over the top, right?
Super over the top.
Yeah, and so we couldn't put that up online, but on YouTube, etc. But it is for our members, so tyt.com/join, and you could watch that now. So believe me, you'll watch that and you'll say, "Oh, I get it. I get that she was over the top and absurd, etc." But having said that, I swear to you that politicians my whole life, if they haven't been quite that degree, they've been really close to that fake, right? And so I think what the difference is here, and I'm gonna give the most ironic credit to the right wing here, because a lot of right wingers called her out afterwards, and they're like, she looked like a total phony. And that is not what would have happened in previous years.
That's true.
There is an actual populist wing of the Republican Party. And yes, they believe a lot of things that are totally wrong, right? But they are calling out their corporate politicians, and they are beginning to call out some of their phony politicians.
Right.
So I think what really did her in was all of a sudden there appeared to be bipartisan agreement about what a phony she is.
That's true, and there was backlash from, I saw from Republican voters online, but more importantly from members of the conservative press. So, Megyn Kelly came out and said it was embarrassing. But for the purposes of this discussion, I want to focus on the anecdote that she shared, that tragic story that she shared in her State of the Union response, right? The one about Carla Jacinto. And turns out that CNN is actually very familiar with Carla and her story. Turns out that Britt got many things wrong as she was relaying information about that horrific ordeal. And so with that in mind, let's take a look at what I'm referring to.
Carla Jacinto also told me that Senator Britt got many of the facts of her story wrong. First of all, Jacinto says that one, she was not trafficked by Mexican drug cartels, but by a pimp that operated as part of a family that entrapped vulnerable girls in order to force them into prostitution. Two, she also said that she was never trafficked in the United States, as Senator Britt appeared to suggest. Three, she was kept in captivity from 2004 to 2008 when President George W. Bush, a Republican, was in office as opposed to the current administration, as the senator implied. And four, she met the senator at an event at the border with other government officials and anti-human trafficking activists instead of one-on-one. CNN has confirmed much of what Jacinto has said in prior reporting, and her story hasn't changed since we first spoke. Jacinto told me no one reached out to her to ask for her permission to use her story as part of a political speech. Someone using my story and distorting it for political purposes, she told me, is not fair at all.
So the very victim that Britt was referring to in that story feels like she has been victimized again with her horrible, horrific, tragic incident being used as a political tool. And then I want to go to one more video because it's important to hear from Jacinto herself. She also spoke to CNN, gave an interview about her thoughts, but more importantly, gave a broader perspective on how these types of situations get exploited for politics. Let's watch.
At one point when I met you years and years ago, you told me that you felt like at the beginning, Mexican politicians had taken advantage of you by using your story for political purposes. Do you feel like that happened once again here in the United States?
Yes. In fact, I hardly ever cooperate with politicians because it seems to me that they only want an image. They only want a photo. And that to me is not fair. I work as a spokesperson for many victims who have no voice, and I really would like them to be empathetic. All the governors, all the senators to be empathetic with the issue of human trafficking, because there are millions of girls and boys who disappear all the time. People who are really trafficked and abused, as she mentioned. And I think she should first take into account what really happens before telling a story of that magnitude.
I mean, this woman's a total class act. I mean, she's resilient, she's fighting for other women and other people who have been victimized similar to how she was victimized. But more importantly, she took this awful situation and this awful exploitation of her story for a political, for a political tool, and has used it to kind of amplify the work that she's doing and make a broader point about how it's important to actually hear people like her out instead of just use people like her for politics.
Yeah, and guys, don't get caught up in the both sizesm too. Meaning, like, just because Britt mangled that story and pretended it was under Biden's term when it wasn't, doesn't mean that rape of migrant women and sometimes men isn't a horrific problem, because it is.
Exactly.
It is a massive problem.
And it is happening.
And it happens to a gigantic percentage of women who are coming to this country, to the point that it's shocking. And I don't know what to do about it. I wish someone actually cared about it so they would try to address the problem. But she's right. politicians on either side haven't done a single thing about the substance of it. They just both keep using it for their own political talking points while never actually fixing it.
I mean, it reminds me of the opioid crisis and the fentanyl crisis here in the United States. We hear a lot about it from our politicians on both sides of the political aisle when they're campaigning. Once the elections are over, we don't hear anything from them about it, and we just hear news stories about the number of overdose deaths increasing for another year in a row. But getting back to Britt, so obviously there was some dishonesty in the way that she shared that story, making viewers think that this horrible incident happened recently under Biden's watch, but it happened under George W. Bush's watch. And so she was asked about that, shockingly on Fox News, so I give them credit for asking her this question. Let's take a look at how she responded.
Nobody is questioning that the story happened, that she is actually who she is, says she is, and that this happened. The question is about the timing and the implication of you telling the story. Did you mean to give the impression that this horrible story happened on President Biden's watch?
No, Shannon, look, I very specifically said this is what President Biden did during his first 100 days. Minutes after coming into office, he stopped all deportations, he halted construction of the border wall, and he said, I am going to give amnesty to millions. Those types of things act as a magnet to have more and more people here. The truth is, and the media knows this, yet they're not covering it, that human trafficking has gone up under President Biden.
Okay, but to be clear, the story that you relayed is not something that's happened under the Biden administration, that particular person.
Well, I very clearly said I spoke to a woman who told me about when she was trafficked when she was 12. So I didn't say a teenager, I didn't say a young woman, a grown woman, a woman when she was trafficked when she was 12.
So what do you think about that, Cenk? Do you think that was a look, do you think that she intended to mislead viewers into thinking that this happened under Biden's watch? Or do you think that, she maybe didn't word it well, but there was no ill intent there?
I think she definitely meant to mislead, okay? But it doesn't really matter. So let me explain both sides of it. So number one, when I watched that whole segment on Fox News and the first time that she was asked a question, she went on for about 2 minutes and never answered. It's an easy question. Did you intend to mislead or did you not intend to mislead? Do you concede that it didn't happen under Biden? These are super easy questions.
And she went on for 2 minutes about Biden, right?
Yeah.
About how bad Biden is.
So further misleading, right? So, and then, and you saw it in that portion of the tape too, she continued to lie. She said, Biden told all of the millions of undocumented immigrants that they could get amnesty. No, he didn't. He never said that. You can criticize Biden's. In fact, there's massive, ample criticism of Biden's policies in immigration.
Absolutely.
And we do have record numbers.
Absolutely.
And Biden didn't have any real policy of his own. He's now trying to copy Trump's policy in a desperate, kind of pathetic attempt. So you see us being honest about the results, about the reality, etc. So you don't have to go to these lies and deceit, etc.
Yeah,
but exactly. She can't help herself. So she pretends that Biden told them, yeah, come on in, I'm gonna give you amnesty. He never even came close to saying that. You could say his actions might have led there, etc., but no need to lie. And in this case, she could have easily couched it as, look, I heard this horrific story from a while ago, but it's still happening today, and then tell the story. These are really easy things to do that doesn't take away from the power of the story. But I think that she thought, and this is another interesting, not silver lining is kind of a tough word for it, but she thought, oh, Republicans can lie ad nauseum, or politicians can lie ad nauseum. We're never going to get called out on it, and we're certainly not going to get called out from our side. Look at Donald Trump, right? No, Trump has special different rules. And so I say it's a tad bit of a silver lining because the right wing is not allowing other Republican politicians to lie quite as much as they allow Trump to lie.
True.
Do you see what I'm saying?
True, but even that, Cenk, I feel like is a relatively new trend. To see conservative outlets pushing back on other conservatives is relatively new.
It is new.
And I appreciate it.
I'm
I like
encouraged by it.
Me too, absolutely. And you're totally right about how, in terms of Biden's immigration policy or lack thereof, he is a target-rich environment, and there really is no need to lie about what he has and hasn't done, because we already see what the, lack of border policy has manifested into, especially when you look at what's happening in some of the liberal cities that have seen an influx of migrants come to their cities when they don't have the resources to adequately respond to it. So, I mean, again, you don't have to make up anything. Just focus on what Biden has fallen short on. But apparently that's not enough in their minds. I don't get it. It's weird.
But again, like Katie Britt, 100% wrong, clear. She's obviously lying and a phony, all that. I'm happy to point that out. I pointed it out then, I'm pointing it out now. But guys, also, my whole life, I see both sides coming in and going, oh, the numbers are terrible for them, the numbers are terrible. Like for example, Obama's immigration numbers, very similar to Trump's and very similar to the first couple of years of Biden. But meanwhile, if you listen to Trump and the Republicans, oh, it was a disaster under Obama. It was perfect under Trump and no one came in. And then it was a disaster under Biden. If you listen to Democrats, oh, Trump was terrible, oh, right, etc. No, the numbers were very similar through Obama, Trump, and Biden. And in the last year, it has spiked considerably.
Obama was referred to as the deporter in chief because of how quickly he would deport people. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's the thing that's so frustrating because I don't know about you, Cenk, but once I realize that a figure or a media outlet or whatever has lied or they've been dishonest, that's it. I'm not gonna trust them ever again, even when they are saying things or sharing information that might actually be accurate. You get what I'm saying?
100%.
So like, stop hurting yourself by spreading lies, because some people who might have an open mind and might actually hear out what you're saying are no longer gonna trust anything you have to say.
Yeah, so at the risk of hurting people's feelings here, let me say it about both sides. Yes, the Republicans are definitely worse. Sorry if that hurts your feelings, but they play fast and loose with the numbers all the time. And they're trying to create a panic in this particular issue, and they've been trying to do it for the last 20 years because they know that their base does not like a changing country. So this is an issue that they dig in on, right? So they will say all the time, oh, it was terrible under Obama, it was horrific under Biden the minute he stepped in office. But brother, it's identical numbers to Trump, right? So please stop lying. You could say it's a real problem under Trump and Obama and Biden, and that is super fair, right? But when you start saying crazy lies that aren't backed up by the evidence at all, now you lose all credibility. And if you're wondering why nobody believes MAGA, it's because of things like that, right? On the other hand, when you have AOC saying that there is no migrant problem, but sister, we can see the numbers.
Yeah.
And the numbers have spiked. When you deny objective reality, you lose all credibility. And I don't care what side you're on.
Totally.
We have to stick with facts and truth and reality because we plan on doing things that the politicians never do, which is trying to actually solve these problems.
Right, and you can't solve the problem if you can't agree on what the facts of the issue happen to be. So,
yes.
All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we have an update on Gaza, specifically Rafah and the alleged tension between Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu. That and more coming up, don't miss it, we'll be right back.
Innocent Americans are dying.
Can't let that happen.
Americans are dying.
All right, so let's go to our members as always. Cenk's old Speedo, hilarious, writes in.
Is it?
Yeah, we're gonna ask for one more change, brother. I'm worried about the answer, but anyway. He says, you don't have one staffer who can verify your anecdote before you repeat it on national television. No, remember, they stopped checking with staffers. They stopped fact checking entirely. I think she thought everyone can lie just like Trump ad nauseum and no one's ever gonna get called out. And she was wrong about that, and that's why it's slightly interesting that happened. Salty Mama says, just made a donation. You just can't get the truth like this every day anywhere else. Thank you for saying that, really appreciate it, and thank you for the contribution. You guys are us, and so I love doing this show with this beautiful community. Brett Campbell writes in, Britt comes across as more and more ridiculous every time I see this. That is true. Go back, like I said, to my original play-by-play on it, the night that we did it. If you're all members, so you can do that. If you're not a member, tyt.com/join or hit the join button below. Check that out, because it was immediately obvious how over the top and ridiculous it was.
Okay, at the risk of, I don't know, giving you too much compliments, Cenk did a really good job covering her speech. Like, someone sent me Cenk's coverage of it, and I died.
Oh,
I'm not even alive right now. This is the ghost of Anna.
Wow, maybe that's why the white jacket.
Think about it.
Casper the Friendly Ghost. No, seriously, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. And I don't, anyways, God bless. I hope you guys enjoy it. Boomer Dragon Cat says, I'm sorry, but a few months to a year of prison sounds like a summer camp and a slap on the wrist. I think all these crimes deserve some real time.
Dude, can I just say, I gotta say, 2 months in a low security prison, I'll take it.
Yeah, look.
That does sound like a vacation for me.
On Twitch, I did this interview series right around when COVID was starting. And I talked to Tommy Chung, old friend of the show from Cheech and Chong. And he did his prison sentence with a roommate you might be familiar with, the Wolf of Wall Street, okay? And so they happened to both be in the same white collar prison. And I asked him, Tommy, was that hard doing this stint in prison? He's like, no, it was very easy, because we were in a low security prison. There weren't even any fences. We could walk out if we wanted to. We just didn't, because it would have gotten you in more trouble.
God.
And we mainly played tennis and read books all day.
Oh my God, Cenk, what kind of crime should I commit to get sentenced to that prison?
White collar crime.
I don't even know how.
Okay.
I asked my CPA, I was like, how can I do some tax maneuvering here? she's like, you're not a shell company, so sorry.
Yeah, no. So it's not in our bones. It's not in our nature. We can't do it anyway. Jeremy writes in, Cenk, as an aside, I wanted to say that I had the pleasure to vote for you in Oklahoma. Thank you for your courage. You're awesome. Well, thank you, Jeremy. You're wonderful for saying that, and wonderful for believing. We're gonna do the next thing. Don't worry.
Innocent Americans are dying.
Can't let that happen.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, but also these lovely people. Quentin Gilliam gifted a membership. Lady Fugan Tea and Margaret Holland Coffee gifted 5 apiece. You guys are amazing. Miranda Yancey just joined, and Disaffected or as they are, upgraded their membership anyway.
Disaffected is the word.
I know.
It's the word. I feel it in my bones.
Yeah, it is not surprising that someone with the handle Disaffected is part of the TYT community. Anyway, thank you. We appreciate you. And everybody, not only can you join, but you can also upgrade through that join button. And if ever there was a time to do either one of those things, it's now, as several companies have gone under in just the last week.
All right, you ready for some international news? Let's get to it.
Would invasion of Rafah, which you have urged him not to do, would that be a red line?
It is a red line.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is rejecting President Biden's criticism after Biden this weekend claimed that Netanyahu's policies are hurting Israel.
It's contrary to what Israel stands for, and I think it's a big mistake.
Everyone in the media has been insisting that President Joe Biden has firmly declared what his red line for Israel is. But did he? Did he really? And how many times does Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu need to slap Biden around publicly for the President of the United States to understand that maybe he needs to change course because he is embarrassing himself and this country by having a foreign leader slap him down repeatedly. Now we'll get to all of that in just 1 minute, but first some critical information on what's currently transpiring in Rafah, which is at the center of this Biden-Netanyahu disagreement. So more than 1 million displaced Palestinians are currently sheltering in Rafah, that is near the border with Egypt, and it's been, I'm just gonna say, relatively safe compared to every other part of the Gaza Strip, because every other part of the Gaza Strip has been suffering from aerial bombardment, airstrikes, Israeli shelling, you get the picture. About 1.4 million Palestinians, more than half of Gaza's population, have crowded into houses, tents, and streets in Rafah to escape the brunt of the fighting elsewhere in the Strip. European leaders and top UN officials have joined the White House in warning Israel against launching a ground invasion of the city, fearing a humanitarian nightmare. Now, when you consider how many people have already died in Gaza, more than 30,000 at this point, you can understand how an even more densely populated region of the Gaza Strip dealing with an IDF ground invasion would lead to a massive humanitarian crisis and very likely an acceleration of civilian deaths. Now, Israel has already carried out some airstrikes in Rafah. That happened over the weekend. Israel struck one of the largest residential towers in Rafah on Saturday. The 12-floor building located 500 meters from the border with Egypt was damaged in the strike. Dozens of families were made homeless, though shockingly, and I'm not entirely sure I believe this, no casualties were reported according to residents. Now, with that in mind, one of the tower's 300 residents told Reuters that Israel did give them a 30-minute warning to flee the building at night, which likely led to a situation where you don't have casualties as a result of that airstrike. But the strike is likely a sign of what's to come. So with that in mind, did Biden really state that a ground invasion in Rafah by the IDF is his red line? Let's watch and you decide for yourselves.
What is your red line with Prime Minister Netanyahu? Do you have a red line? For instance, would invasion of Rafah, which you have urged him not to do, would that be a red line?
It is a red line, but I'm never going to leave Israel. The defense of Israel is still critical, so there's no red line. I'm going to cut off all weapons so they don't have the Iron Dome to protect them. They don't have, but there's red lines that if he crosses, and you cannot have 30,000 more Palestinians dead as a consequence of going after. There's other ways to deal with the trauma caused by Hamas. And it's like look, the first time I went over, I sat with them and I sat with a work cabinet. I said, look, don't make the mistake America made.
I don't know, that did not sound like a red line to me, but maybe I'm having some comprehension issues. Cenk, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's because he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. And of course, the mainstream press is very, very happy to let him do that. So he said, John Capehart asked, hey, is invading Rafah basically a ground invasion of Rafah your red line? And he said, yes. But then he quickly said, now it's not a red line in terms of giving them unlimited weapons, etc. So it's not a red line then.
They think we're stupid, right?
Right, so like, and then he said, a second time that something else was a red line, he said, they cannot kill another 30,000 Palestinians, that's a red line. And then he went, about the consequences, because there is no consequences, because it's not a red line. So first of all, which one is it? Ground invasion of Rafah or an extra 30,000 Palestinians dead? Because those are two very different red lines. And secondly, if that's true, what are the consequences of a red line? It's not a red line if there are no consequences. And he just told you right there, and he throughout the rest of the interview, he did not clarify at all that there would ever be a consequence to Israel. So it's just loose talk, it's totally BS. That is why you'll see Netanyahu slaps him down and says, who the hell do you think you are? Get back in line. And a foreign leader that's taking billions of dollars from us can afford to do that because Biden is not drawing the line with him.
That's exactly right. In fact, why don't we hear more from Netanyahu's response?
Despite that warning from President Biden of not crossing that red line, We have Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that that offensive in Rafah will in fact go ahead, saying that his red line is October 7th and making sure that that doesn't happen again. And he said that an IDF incursion into Rafah to root out Hamas there could take 2 months, perhaps even less than 2 months, and that there would be no pause in the fighting until there is some kind of a deal made to bring the hostages home. He also left open the possibility of expanding military operations into southern Lebanon.
We're going to get back to expanding military operations to southern Lebanon in just a moment, because keep in mind, Netanyahu responded to Biden's alleged red line by saying, no, I'm gonna spread this war out, make it broader. I'm gonna go to war with another country. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, Jake, Netanyahu says that his red line was October 7th, when Hamas carried out atrocities in his country, which he failed to protect his citizens from. And Hamas is partly propped up and funded by who?
Well, it was by Netanyahu.
Oh, that's right. Netanyahu funded and propped up Hamas.
And
so
he knew the attack was coming and he didn't do anything about it. So, I mean, if that's your red line, it looks like your own red line says you should get the hell out of office, because it was you who crossed your own red line. It's a great point by Anna. Right?
By the way, just reported, Israel has officially invaded Rafah. Biden will consider conditioning military aid. I don't buy it for 1 second.
Go ahead,
we'll
do
see
it.
how that plays out. We'll see how it plays
You
out.
condition military aid and show us that it was a real red line. We're thrilled to come back out here and go, oh, finally, Biden's doing the right thing. We're super happy to report it, etc. Why wouldn't we report it? So now let me tell you, in fact, let me report one other wrinkle to this that is relevant, which is that Hamas is doing something really stupid and counterproductive, and I don't know why they're doing it, and it is partly responsible, and I could argue even that it's largely responsible for not having the ceasefire by Ramadan. It looks like Israel, America, and the Arab countries made a deal to get to the ceasefire before Ramadan, but Hamas won't turn over the names of the hostages they have.
I don't think they have it.
Yeah, they might not.
I don't think that they have kept track of all the hostages. I think what's very likely to have happened is that some of them have died, some of them are alive, but maybe have escaped Hamas's captivity, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's the reason why they're refusing to give a list of the hostages, those alive and those who have died.
Yeah, so plenty of blame to go around for sure. And Hamas, if they don't have the names, they should just goddamn say it.
Right.
Get to the ceasefire already. Now, it's not, that deal is definitely not good enough, because Netanyahu says whether it's today or 2 months from now, I'm gonna level Rafah anyway. So it's like, it is just a ceasefire. It is not a peace deal. But my hope is that they could use the time in Ramadan to turn it into an actual peace deal. I know that it's very, very, very optimistic to think that that could happen, but at least it would be a shot, and it would at least stop the bombing temporarily, right? And get the hostages back. So Hamas should get off their ass, and I know us yelling at them has no effect, right? But you should understand that they are definitely significantly responsible for not having the ceasefire today, okay? In the past it was mainly Israel, but today it's mainly Hamas. Okay, now back to Biden though. He says my red line is going into Rafah. Netanyahu says, oh yeah, what are you gonna do about it? I'm crossing your red line and I'm telling the entire world that I'm crossing it. I'm gonna go into Rafah and I'm gonna do everything you told me not to do. Now shut up and give me $14 billion extra. And give me hundreds of times where you funnel weapons to me without even telling Congress, another story we covered last week. Give me $250 million more without telling Congress, as we told you about a month ago, right? You will do as you're goddamn told, Joe Biden, and there's no damn red line for me. And Biden is gonna go, yes sir, okay sir, but maybe he won't. Maybe he'll condition the aid, and then I'd be thrilled to report it to you. But if history is any guide, Joe Biden is not in charge. Netanyahu's in charge of this relationship. He's acting like it. You're seeing it with your own eyes. So either Biden's gonna put up, or he should shut up and just admit what he's really doing, which is letting Israel do any war crime they like, as long as he thinks the money keeps flowing to him through campaign contributions.
So I want to go to two other things. Before we get to the last video, I wanted to give you the other disconnect between Biden and Netanyahu, because they appear to have quite a few disagreements, but Biden hasn't used any sticks so far, if you will, only carrots. So the Biden administration's vision for a long-term peace deal between Israel and Palestinians includes a firm timeline for the establishment of a Palestinian state, setting up another potential standoff with Israel's leader. And let me be clear, there has not been a standoff at all.
There's been none.
Like the framing by the press drives me crazy. There has been zero standoff, okay? None of that. Biden has issued some very weak statements without any real action behind them. And every time Biden does, Netanyahu stands up and slaps him down, embarrasses, the American people and the American government by doing so, and then we move on with our lives. And I would venture to say this is gonna be another example. Netanyahu has been very clear in not wanting a two-state solution. In fact, he said, quote, "We don't want to see a Palestinian state," Netanyahu told Axel Springer, that's a publication in Germany, repeating his long-standing position that he said represents the consensus within Israel. Cenk.
Yeah, so there's a reason why mainstream media keeps telling you a false image of this conflict that doesn't exist, and how Biden's standing up to Netanyahu when he has literally done nothing to stand up to Netanyahu other than BS verbiage. So why does the media go along with it? Because they are in the same general groupthink as mainstream establishment Democrats. So what they want to do is show you an image of Joe Biden who's struggling here because he loves Israel so much and he's such a great guy for being such a good friend and ally to Israel. But God, he is so empathetic to the Palestinians and his heart breaks for them. So he's telling Netanyahu to cut out the malarkey. It's all theater. He's done zero. It is a fact. You could look it up anywhere you like. Look and read the articles and see if he has taken one step to check Israel in terms of funding, access, allyship, anything at all. He has done absolutely, positively nothing but let Netanyahu set our foreign policy for us. There is no disagreement between them. It's all a game to make it seem like Biden's a nice guy and that Arab and Muslim Americans should vote for him anyway.
All right, we're out of time. We're gonna take our break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about Nancy Mace pushing back against George Stephanopoulos and his questions about why she decided to endorse and support Donald Trump, especially given her past and his own past. So that and more coming up, don't miss it. We'll be right back.
Now I'm gonna do something very different here and read some one-star reviews of the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Donnie Franchise said, pretty much it's like listening to a trash compactor. Someone else said, negative, anti-American propaganda. And others said, out of context, misquotes, typical leftists who are afraid to debate, just smear. These two would be perfect for CNN or MSLSD. Well, Donnie, you might have a point, because I feel like a trash compactor right now after taking in all those garbage reviews. But thanks for listening anyway. We are, in fact, unapologetically progressive. And if you're not ready for bold commentary, then we're not the show for you. On the Young Turks, we speak up about the issues that matter, and we want to make positive change happen. And now here's why we actually do the show. Mariel Morales said, found this podcast from the True Crime Podcast, Fruit Loops, and other great progressive podcasts. I've become an instant fan of the Young Turks. Great conversation, great takes, very well composed, factual podcast, very informative. Love to hear that. Z55 said, it's a joy to experience such awareness and intelligence from fascinating people. And Anna is gorgeous and brilliant. Apparently I'm just fascinating, but I'll take it. Paul for Progress said, news well delivered. Appreciate it. KOOK said, Democrats and Republicans are fair game for TYT. And if Anna or Cenk provide disinformation about anything, they will admit they made a mistake and correct it. We appreciate you noticing that we are honest. To people who actually listen to the substance of the show, thank you. Your listenership supports what we do. Leave a 5-star rating for the Young Turks on Apple Podcasts. Let's take the ratings back from the trolls. Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. Here at TYT, we understand this. That's why we're not gonna price gouge you or use inflation as an excuse to raise our prices. A TYT membership is not your typical subscription, but basic membership is still just $4.99. So what do you get for that price? For starters, you're getting exclusive programming, unique, exclusive designs from Shop TYT, access to a members-only chat, giveaways, emojis, and so many other amazing perks. But most importantly, you're helping to make an impact. As a TYT member, you not only help us do the shows every day, but you drive real positive change in the process. In 2017, we helped to start Justice Democrats right here on TYT. That's a group that got a dozen progressives elected into Congress. That's amazing, you did that. Your support also funds TYT's very own investigative reporting. Just recently, our reporters exposed the Fellowship Foundation and pressured lawmakers into boycotting that bigoted event. Isn't that amazing? We raised over $30,000 for Jackson, Mississippi, and delivered clean water to thousands of people in need. Our petitions, polls, and community of activists help keep the corruption of Washington in check. That's the impact of what just $4.99 a month from our members can do. And we're just getting started. Positive change doesn't occur overnight, but with your contribution, we can make it happen together.
A new TYT app experience is now available. Check out brand new features like voting in polls and signing petitions. You can also follow your favorite TYT shows, join the live chat, engage in message boards, search for and follow topics you care about, and much more. Download the app by searching for TYT in the App Store or via Google Play.
You're the president of the United States. You can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it.
They call them dumps, big, massive dumps.
Documents.
All right, back on TYT. So I'm gonna read a couple of YouTube member comments here. And then we got some amazing stories coming up for you guys in a little bit. So YouTube members, Moving Death wrote in, TYT releases that chemical in my brain that makes us happy.
Really?
Wow, thank you, I appreciate that so much. There's a lot of people who wrote in with beautiful things. Yeah. This one I didn't understand, but they say that you will understand. Tommy Biscuits wrote in, I think Britt would be qualified to read an excerpt of Bots from top to bottom. Apparently she did understand it. Nice job, Tommy Biscuits.
So it's an inside joke. It's between us, Cenk. Sorry.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Become a member, understand those inside jokes. I must have missed it on the Wednesday show. TYT.com/join or hit the join button below. Greg Javert writes in, and every time I read your name, I think, and I'm Javert. Okay, but anyways, the butler with the candlestick in the security camera room next to the indoor pool. I like the Clue reference, and I got it. So that's about the Brian Butler story. Exoteric says, stay strong, TYT, America needs you. That's beautiful, and we need you. So if you stay strong with us, we stay strong with America, and we're all good. Terry Kading writes in, Cenk, I finished your book, and I'm very excited for the future. You've given me hope, and I love you for that. Wow, thank you, TYT.com/justice. Rayshawn Ordway says, Cenk with a black blazer and Anna with a white blazer. It's the yin and yang of progressives, the Charlie's Angels of politics. LOL, I love it. Okay, well, that's a very nice reference, and I'll take Farrah Fawcett. Actually, okay, fine, she's Farrah Fawcett, okay. But was it Jacqueline?
I don't know.
I forget now, but
this kind of stuff.
Anyways, okay, Peter Hamby in Super Chat writes in, Nancy Mace has insulted a lot of families of rape victims, including myself, since my sister was one. Whether or not I believe she was raped, her siding with a famed rapist says so much about her. Peter, we're gonna get to that story next, so stay right here for that, and we'll give you all the details. Carlos Aguillo writes in, elites are always going to try to get away with crimes. Can I get a can't let that happen?
Can't let that happen.
How quick is Bart?
Bart's super quick.
Okay. Cod Sterling says, hoping for Trump brand prison toilet wine soon. I wouldn't put it past him. Look, I'm here in prison, but I gotta tell you something. Trump toilet wine is the best toilet wine. Okay. And then he sells it on True Social. It's not impossible. Yeezus Trapito writes, in South Africa in the house, as someone of Palestinian ancestry, we appreciate you. Well, there was another guy named Yeezus that also came from Palestine. And so you're appropriately named. Thank you, brother. We appreciate that. We appreciate all of you watching from all across the world. A lot of you have written in even just today from Europe, from Africa, and from all those other fine and lovely places. R. Stone says, breaking news, politicians engaged in lying. Also, water is wet to humans. Film at 11. That's a reference to Brit and Trump. Lady F&T says, she's so meant to be misleading, referring to the Brit mentioning the old case on the immigration. And then I'll read one that is critical and one that's long, and then we'll do the story about Nancy Mace after we come back. Me being 42 wrote in, TYT should forever stop telling people how to protest, period, doing the show together. Okay, so I hear you. A couple other people wrote in about that. They hate it when I say don't go to their house, and some folks want to go to people's house, etc. I think the house is a bridge too far. Everybody gets to make their own decisions. We don't control you. It's a free country. It's my legitimate, genuine opinion that going to the house is counterproductive. On the other hand, going to their office makes a lot of sense. Okay, so and crossing a physical line makes no sense. It is my job to tell you guys that when I genuinely believe it, okay? But everybody's free to do what they want, okay? So now don't do any violence, though. Please, 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 please don't do anything physical. Okay, History Speaks last thing here says, Cenk, I strongly disagree with your suggestion that Palestinians have to waive the right of return in a peace deal. They'll never agree to this, and it's unjust. Should the Cherokee had waived their right to live in Oklahoma in a peace settlement? One-state solution is not practical for the short run. There would be civil war, but our policy should be a two-state solution on 1967 borders while supporting the right of return of the indigenous population in the long run. Well, brother, I would love that. I think 1967 borders with the right of return is exactly right. But I know with absolute certainty that we are not going to get that. So my job is to tell you my real opinions about what is practical and doable so we can get the justice. Waiting for the ideal has cost Palestinians potentially decades of freedom. So you gotta know when to compromise. You gotta know when to push, and you gotta know when to take the deal. And that is tough. It's not easy, it's not binary. It's very easy to be binary. Oh, everything is bad, everything is good. I want everything, I want nothing, right? But getting a deal done involves a lot of pushing, which mainstream establishment status quo don't want. And we're telling you push, push, push. And when the time comes, please take the deal if it's a good enough deal. Because that's, and always remember Martin Luther King Jr. He pushed Lyndon Johnson to the very brink. And then when he had a deal good enough on Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act, he took it and he helped the whole civil rights movement say, okay, you're right, let's take the deal. So that's what we got to get to. But right now, unfortunately, we're not anywhere near that. All right, we're gonna take a break here, guys. When we come back, we'll hear from you guys again, but mainly we're gonna go to Nancy Mace, because I think what she did is really abhorrent, and I want you guys to see it. All right, we'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. I'm gonna read one last comment as I promised you. Lila East wrote in, and you guys are so wonderful to us today. It said, I love TYT, they helped mold me from a Republican into a progressive over several years. I wouldn't be the same person without the TYT crew. Love you all. Well, we love you right back. That's a beautiful thing to say. And I love anybody with open heart and open mind.
Totally.
And that's exactly what you exhibited, so thank you.
I want to learn more about your evolution. Like what did we talk about on the show that persuaded you to consider a different political ideology? Like, I'm always super fascinated by that. So if you want to, write in again, let us know. I want to learn more.
And just last thing on that is that, you see, and you hear me reading comments like that almost every day now, right? And how many people have come over to becoming Democrats instead of when they were Republicans, independents, libertarians, etc., right? Meanwhile, if you watch mainstream media, their number one critique of us is that we're helping Trump and we're driving people to Republicans. Like, it's such an Alice in Wonderland, through the looking glass, topsy-turvy insanity that they spew on there, that it's just maddening. So anyway, that was, again, one of the top critiques I had when I ran. They're like, oh, you just want to help Trump and the Republicans. No, nothing could be further from the truth. But when it comes to other forms of media, they don't seem to care a lot about the truth. Anyway, let's do more stories.
We will, after we come back from this break, in which we still have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Cenk, go nuts, more comments.
Oh, this is the break. I forgot this is the break. Oh, sorry. Sammy J74 became a member on our website. I love it. Purple Rain Dragon says, hey everyone, I'm just requesting a shout on this on my 40th birthday. First of all, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
I'm very grateful to this community for the light and positivity it puts us into this world. 2023 was one of the lowest years of my life, but I could always come here to laugh and hear and read supportive comments, and it was literally a lifesaver for me. I started 2024 getting pre-approved for a mortgage on New Year's Day. We closed on our house on February 6th, and I'm sitting in my home alive and happier than I have ever been. Thanks in large part to you all. I am so grateful. That is amazing. And by the way, they're not just saying that about us, they're saying that about you guys.
Right.
The community and how we're sticking together and we're being a light to each other. So I talked in the podcast that I went on today, Bad Faith with Brianna Joy Gray, about Operation Hope and how we're going to revive that. So stay right here, that is coming next. So when I talk about what's coming next, it's not another political run, oh God forbid. Okay, it is how we are all going to work together to try to put some hope into the world. So join the town halls. They were my campaign town halls. You'll see on social media, I'll put them out there. Soon there'll be TYT town halls, but here in this interregnum, come join them because we're gonna start the planning as we go. And I'm out of time. All right, we'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, more news.
Well, Nancy Mace is getting a lot of attention for her handling of an interview with George Stephanopoulos. Let's get right to it.
Now, you've endorsed Donald Trump for president. Judges and 2 separate juries have found him liable for rape and for defaming the victim of that rape. How do you square your endorsement of Donald Trump with the testimony we just saw?
Well, I will tell you, I was raped at the age of 16. And any rape victim will tell you, I've lived for 30 years with an incredible amount of shame over being raped. I didn't come forward because of that judgment and shame that I felt. And it's a shame that you will never feel, George. And I'm not going to sit here on your show and be asked a question meant to shame me.
George Stephanopoulos wanted to know why, as a victim of rape herself, Representative Nancy Mace has decided to support and endorse former President Donald Trump. Now, he was found liable for sexual assault in the E. Jean Carroll situation. We'll get to that in just a moment. But Nancy Mace did not take kindly to that question, as you can tell in the clip we just showed you, and repeatedly accused Stephanopoulos of shaming her as a rape victim. Now, before we get to more of their exchange, it is important to refresh our memories about what exactly Trump was found liable for. Now, according to writer E. Jean Carroll, she and Trump had bumped into each other in a department store back in the mid-1990s. So, Trump said that he wanted help picking out a gift for another woman, and apparently E. Jean Carroll obliged and said that she would assist him. They went into a dressing room, Carroll alleged, where Trump quickly attacked her, forcing his fingers and then his penis inside her vagina. Carroll said she kneed him and fled, telling 2 friends, and then remaining silent until 2019. Now, a civil jury in New York found in May of 2023 that former President Donald Trump sexually abused and defamed E. Jean Carroll. for which he recently posted a $91.6 million bond as he appeals this ruling, okay? And by the way, he continues to defame her, and so he keeps getting slapped with additional defamation allegations by E. Jean Carroll because he can't help himself. He is his own worst enemy. Now, in the first clip that we showed you, Stephanopoulos claims that Trump was found liable for rape, which isn't exactly correct. So look, we want to be as accurate as possible. Rather, Trump was found liable of sexual assault, which doesn't really make the situation better in my mind, but it's not the same as rape. So it's important to be clear there. He's also been accused of sexual assault by at least 25 other women since the 1970s. None of those allegations ever went to court. The E. Jean Carroll civil case was the only example of something being taken to court and Trump being found guilty of sexual abuse. Now, that's why George Stephanopoulos decided to ask Mace, well, look, you've been open about what happened to you, about how you were victimized by a rape. How do you justify supporting a candidate who, in a court of law, was shown to have committed sexual misconduct? And so we're going to get to more of their exchange in just a moment. But Cenk, look, do you think it's a fair question to ask her?
Yes, but there is a but in there.
Okay.
So the thing that I would say is that I don't want reporters just asking people who suffered sexual assault if Trump is a monster and why they're supporting Trump when Trump was convicted of sexual assault in this civil context. I want them asking all Republicans or all people that support Trump because I could see how that becomes an extra burden on victims of sexual assault, that they're the ones that have to answer it the most, right? Now, having said that, is it an illegitimate question overall? No, not at all. It makes perfect sense to ask that question. And is Nancy Mace genuinely, angry at George Stephanopoulos and thinks that he's doing it only to victims of sexual assault? No, having watched the whole thing, I don't get that sense at all. I get the sense that she was desperate to not answer the question and she wanted to avoid it because it's embarrassing. Because she wants to raise her hand and say, I'm a woman who has dealt with these terrible things, so you should trust me that I have women's best interest in mind. But at the same time, if my political benefactor does the same exact thing to another woman or something similar, I don't really care, because it helps me politically. But I don't want you to think I don't care. So I'm gonna pretend to be outraged. So because if she was being honest, she could say, hey, you should ask every Republican this same exact question. I'd say deal, makes sense. You should ask every Republican this question.
And remember, Nancy Mace is the one who went out there and shared what had happened to her, specifically in a political context in the middle of a political debate. She came out and shared what happened to her during the reversal of Roe v. Wade and some of these red states basically banning abortion under any and all circumstances. And she came out and publicly talked about what she experienced and how she was victimized in order to make a point about how it's important to have exceptions for victims of rape. When you basically invite the public into your personal life and what has happened to you, when you have taken this horrific thing that's happened to you and you've used it as part of an argument, a political argument, well then all bets are off and you should be prepared for journalists and reporters to ask you about it in other contexts.
Yeah, so I think that one of our members on the chat on tyt.com made a really good point. Zayfad Bibelbrock says, I understand where her emotion came from, but it is a fair question.
It is, I think so too.
So let's see if she has a fair answer.
And by the way, let me just also note, if there's a way of asking this question that is inappropriate, unjustified, needlessly mean, I didn't get that sense from George Stephanopoulos.
Neither did I.
So with that in mind, he did try to clarify that he was not in fact trying to shame her in any way, but she doubled down. So let's watch.
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald Trump.
No, you are shaming me.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury. Donald Trump has been found liable for defaming the victim of that rape by a jury. It's been affirmed by a judge.
It was not a criminal court case, number one. Number two, I live with shame. And you're asking me a question about my political choices, trying to shame me as a rape victim, and I find it disgusting. And this is why women won't come forward.
Women won't come forward because they're defamed by those who perpetrate rape. Donald Trump
They are judged and they're shamed, and you're trying to shame me this morning. I think it's disgusting.
I'm not shaming you at all.
I told my story. It took me 25 years to tell my story. I was judged for it. I still get judged for it today.
I'm asking you a very simple question.
Answer it. You're shaming me for my political choices.
I'm asking you.
He's giving you an opportunity to explain why you have chosen to support Donald Trump despite these black marks on his past and his recent history. You should be ready for a response to that. And look, it's a hard question. Like, I totally understand where she's coming from in not wanting to answer that question, because it is a tough question that's very likely impossible to answer.
Yeah.
But she is supporting him because not supporting him as a Republican in Congress amounts to political suicide in today's political climate. That's what the reality of the situation is.
Guys, this is not,
that's it.
It's not that close. She's obviously trying to avoid the question. So look, there's a lot of things you could say that people were trying to shame me when they ask questions. They have been asked 1,000 questions that are wildly inappropriate, and this question wasn't even inappropriate, right? But, or you could say, like, substantively, when I was in favor of the death penalty, you could say, oh, I could have said, are you trying to shame me, saying that I'm okay with innocent people dying? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's the point they're making. So why don't you answer it and explain why you're not in favor of that, right? So these are fair questions in the middle of a debate that sometimes is about incredibly sensitive topics, including sexual assault. And it is also, let's acknowledge, a very logical question that if you suffered this terrible thing that you went through,
that you talk about in the context of politics.
Yeah. Don't you have some degree of sympathy for E. Jean Carroll, who went through something similar? And Trump is bragging about what he did and how he's still calling her names and making fun of her and getting crowds to laugh at her, etc. And apparently she doesn't feel that. So you can call it anything you like, Nancy Mace.
God, I mean,
but you're obviously trying to avoid answering the main question, which is, why do you support this monster? And you have no good answer for that.
I mean, she's in an impossible position, right? Because she doesn't want to flat out reject or deny what the victim, E. Jean Carroll, is saying, although she does also tend to minimize what came out of that civil case. In fact, she's about to do it in the next clip. Let's just take a quick look at that.
I'm not trying to.
You are. That's exactly.
You're not
what
answering
you're
the
doing.
question.
I think it's disgusting.
Well, you're welcome to say that, but you have to answer the question. Why are you supporting someone who's been found liable for rape?
I just answered your question.
What is the answer?
He was not found guilty in a criminal court of law. It was sexual abuse. It wasn't actually rape, by the way. And E. Jean Carroll joked about all the money she's going to get and made a mockery out of this case. And I think that's offensive. There's a reason why women don't come forward.
You said women don't come forward because they are afraid. They are afraid because they're defamed
and shamed
by those
like you're trying to shame me this morning.
They are afraid to come forward, as you said, because they are defamed by those who commit the rape. That's what Donald Trump has been found guilty of doing.
He defended himself over that and denies that it ever happened, but he was not found guilty in a criminal court of law.
Okay, so being found guilty in a civil court of law doesn't matter. Also, women don't come forward when they've been victimized because people don't take their allegations seriously, as Nancy Mace is currently doing as we speak. And by the way, what E. Jean Carroll managed to do is something that a lot of women who have been victimized with sexual misconduct are basically never able to do, right? To, in a court of law, whether it be civil or criminal, be able to prove that they were victimized in this way. So you're right, Cenk. It's the gaslighting that's driving me nuts, and how she's kind of twisting this in like one of the most dishonest ways imaginable. But I also understand why she's doing it, because it is an impossible situation, right? How do you justify supporting a guy who honestly not only has this in his past, but the sexual misconduct stuff, but also attacked her personally, Nancy Mace personally. He has called Nancy Mace both nasty and disloyal in the recent past, and also endorsed her 2022 primary opponent.
But that's why she got scared. And she, winds up having the zeal of the converted. So she's like, well, I don't want to go through that again because that could cost me my precious power. Precious. So that's why she turned around completely on Trump and is kissing his ass no matter what he does. I mean, guys, let's look. I think one of our members, Aaron Johnson, came up with exactly what you can do in this so-called unsolvable situation. I'll get to him in a second. But in this case, what's she doing? She's shaming E. Jean Carroll. After like saying that she's so outraged by shaming any sexual assault victim, she's like, and she had the temerity to laugh once in her life. I mean, you're shaming her for that?
How are you not prepared for this question?
Yeah.
That's the thing that really stands out to me. How are you not prepared for this question? You have to have some answer. Give it some thought. Because she bungled that like crazy. There are some people who are buying the nonsense narrative that she's being shamed. But again, when she has openly and willingly shared what has happened to her, honestly, to make a political argument on a different issue, you should be ready for people to ask about how you were raped and how that plays into decisions you make on other issues, politically speaking.
Yeah, and last thing before I get to the members, this defense of, well, he was convicted only in a civil court, not in a criminal court, is one of the weakest things I've ever heard. Guys, OJ also got acquitted in a criminal court, but was convicted in a civil court of the murders of Goldman and his ex-wife, right? OJ's ex-wife, Nicole Simpson. So are all these right-wingers saying, no, OJ's obviously not guilty. He was innocent, he didn't do it at all, even though he got convicted in the civil case. Come on, that's absurd. That's obviously absurd. You know that's absurd. So last word goes to our members because they wrote in with personal stuff that I think is really important. Deanne Loso wrote in, being a victim of rape by my ex-husband, if I'd openly shared that experience, which I guess is what I'm doing right now, I wouldn't have a problem with this question. She continues, I feel shame. I think all women feel shame, but I have great sympathy for E. Jean Carroll.
By the way,
that's very logical, right? If you feel that kind of thing, that you should feel great sympathy to E. Jean Carroll. Does it look like Nancy Mace feels that kind of sympathy?
Yeah, and look, I know that I'm gonna say this and it's not gonna matter because anyone who's been victimized in this way, man, woman, doesn't matter. The shame is always there. I just wish it weren't the case because there's no reason that any victim should feel shame.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. Look, we love our members. Thank you for trusting us enough to share that with all of us because we all learn from it. And finally, Aaron Johnson, as I promised, he wrote in, hi, I'm a new member. I used to be a Trump supporter until all this came to light. I morally cannot support someone who sexually abuses women. Thank you for being there for America. Wow. See, Nancy Mace, that's not too hard, right? Hey, I used to like this guy for different reasons, but this is something I cannot get behind, whether it happened to you or it didn't, right? And so as a moral, decent human being, I can't support this. See, that wasn't that hard, but the reason it's hard for her is because she's so enraptured with her political career and her ego and her status and title and power that she can't let go and be honest with you guys.
All right, let's take our final break. And when we come back, we've got more news for you, including Donald Trump's 180 on a TikTok ban. And this comes as Congress is inching closer to actually passing legislation that could lead to a TikTok ban. And if we have time, maybe we'll also discuss Bill Maher's dream presidential ticket, which makes me want to pull my hair out. That and more coming up, don't miss it.
All right, guys, you know, we've been telling you about all these companies that very, very unfortunately are going under in digital media because of the shifting landscape. I wanted to give you a sense that it's not just us, it's everybody. And I'm gonna take an email from the people who ran Rooster Teeth, who was around, by the way, 21 years. We've been around 22 years, but Rooster Teeth, I'm sure a lot of you aren't familiar with it because it's in a different space than news and politics. It's in gaming and other things, satire, etc. But they were a wonderful company, did a lot of good, and a really good community. I admired them in a lot of ways, and unfortunately, they're not in business anymore. That just happened last week. And here's something they wrote in the email, the executives did. Now, however, it's with a heavy heart I announce that Rooster Teeth is shutting down due to challenges facing digital media resulting from fundamental shifts in consumer behavior and monetization across platforms, advertising, and patronage. And they explained that a couple times throughout the email that they wrote. Guys, this is a thing that's happening to the whole industry. And so the only way for us to survive it, as others are not able to survive, is you guys. So if we can get to, for example, 100,000 members, that would definitely solidify us and we would be gold. And then from then on, maybe we have enough room to grow, maybe we don't, but at least we're sustainable and we're good. It's a big lofty goal to get there, but I believe, and so if you can, great time to join, a critical time to join. Either hit the join button below on YouTube or tyt.com/join. Also upgrades, also contributions through both of those things. You could do a contribution at tyt.com/join too. So now let me read all these wonderful comments from our member section. Tired and Retired said, we're taking a road trip to see Francesca and Matt in Sacramento this weekend. We're going to listen to your book on the drive, Cenk. That's beautiful. Thank you for getting the book, the audio version, obviously, tyt.com/justice if you want to. But most of all, I love that you're going to support other members of the TYT community and you're doing a road trip out of it. That's beautiful. Franny's gonna be great, so I hope you enjoy that. Sword of Words says, sometimes when I hear your voices, I go into a slumber. Wait, what? They continue, not that you're boring, but I know and feel safer. In the meantime, onward with the silly lies and sometimes sillier truth. That's also a beautiful thing to say. Thank you so much for saying that. And you are safe here. We keep it real with you guys. Eclectic Miscellaneous says, the problem is that we have to stick to reality as progressives, but MAGA doesn't feel any need to stick to reality. And for corporate Democrats, it's optional. That is also true, brother, but that should not move us off of doing the right thing. And you know that and you're great with that. Organic Panic writes in, I've been a member for about 6 or 7 years. I just gave an annual TYT membership to a friend. Here's a challenge I propose. If someone else gives an annual membership on the TYT site during tonight's show, I'll give another annual membership gift tomorrow. This will continue all this week. Sorry, I could only do this for a week. I'm a teacher.
Wow.
Are you kidding me? I love it.
That's
You're amazing. Thank you.
I just love you.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Smokey and the Barely There, who just upgraded their membership, and Matt L, who just joined, and BH, who gifted 5 memberships. And Organic Panic on our website just announced that they're doing a challenge where if for every annual membership, they'll buy one too. On tyt.com/join only this week, and he's going to do it tomorrow. It's an unbelievable thing. Thank you for saying that. I just wanted everybody to know about it. We appreciate you all. tyt.com/join to do that. All right, Anna.
We've got an update on attempts to ban TikTok. Let's get to it.
And yet it appears that you've now reversed your view on banning TikTok. Why is that?
So I had it done, and then Congress said, well, they ultimately usually fail. They are like extremely political.
What? Donald Trump has done a complete 180 on banning TikTok, and money in politics, meaning the swamp that he wanted to drain, is a big part of it. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, it is worth learning about how Congress is inching closer to passing a law that would potentially ban TikTok in the United States unless the platform is sold to a non-Chinese entity. Now, TikTok is owned by the parent company ByteDance, which is based in Beijing. Lawmakers from both sides of the political aisle have long expressed concerns that Chinese authorities could force ByteDance to turn over data that it is collecting on its 170 million American users. TikTok has denied any assertion that it could be used as a tool by the Chinese government. In fact, the company has said that it has never shared US user data with Chinese authorities and won't do so if it's asked. I don't think you should believe that. I think you should take that with a grain of salt. Nonetheless, to date, US government has not provided any evidence that ByteDance is in fact sharing the data of US consumers to the Chinese government. But nonetheless, I mean, just because the politicians here in the US don't have hard evidence to show you doesn't mean that it's not happening. Every single website, every single platform, every single app absolutely collects your data, and it is not far-fetched to believe that the Chinese government would demand that ByteDance hand over that data to them. Now, there is a proposal that's making its way through Congress that seeks to ban TikTok unless it's sold to a non-Chinese entity. On Thursday of last week, for instance, a House panel unanimously approved a bipartisan bill that would require the Chinese firm to divest TikTok and other applications it owns within 6 months of the bill's enactment in order to avoid a nationwide ban. The legislation also creates a process that lets the executive branch prohibit access to other apps that pose a threat to national security. Now, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise has announced that he plans to bring this to the broader House, to the House floor, if you will, to do a vote on this. But keeping it real, it's unclear how this is gonna play out in the Senate, where the legislative filibuster still exists, where you would need 60 senators to vote in favor of the legislation in order for it to pass. And quite frankly, other attempts to ban TikTok in Congress have stalled in the Senate. Now, under the legislation, the platform would be prohibited from app stores, such as those offered by Apple and Google, as well as web hosting services until a divestiture occurs. But even if that would happen, it's likely that users could still have access to the platform by just using a VPN. Let's just keep it real. People who want to use TikTok are going to find a way to be able to continue using TikTok. Although if the app stores don't sell it, they're unlikely to be able to use it through an app. They would probably just have to log on through a web page instead.
Okay, so in a sec, we're gonna get to why Trump has done his flip-flop and how it involves the phrase "Yes, Queen." But first, that first clip that we showed you of Trump on CNBC, if Biden had done the same exact thing, we'd all be talking about how Biden should drop out of the race right now. What was that? That was Trump going, could anyone discern anything he said in that little clip?
I can.
Right.
Here's what he said, what he was communicating in that clip. This was a difficult question that I wasn't prepared for, and I don't want to tell the audience that I did a 180 on banning TikTok because I'm trying to court a mega donor that has a 15% stake in TikTok.
There's your translation, not remotely what he said, but exactly what he meant.
Yes.
Okay, and so we'll get to that in a second. But on the TikTok issue itself, look, I can't tell if TikTok's a national security threat or not. I've seen a lot of credible people explain why it's not, because it runs through an American company, right? And I've seen plenty of credible people say, no, yeah, even though it does, maybe the Chinese can get it now or can get it in the future, etc. So there's no way of me being able to tell. I'm not enough of an expert on Coder and all those different things.
Cenk,
okay.
ByteDance is based in Beijing.
I know, but they run it through Oracle. It's confusing. So it's not perfectly clear to me, but it could be, they could not be. But the most important thing for me is, I don't think that's why anybody's trying to ban TikTok.
100% I agree with you.
Okay.
I agree with you.
Yeah, so that's their excuse for wanting to ban TikTok. The reality is, both the Democrats and the Republicans, the Uniparty, despises TikTok because young people are progressive. And the morons think that TikTok is turning them progressive, when in reality, they were already progressive and TikTok is just showing that to the rest of the world.
They're under the assumption that China is indoctrinating America's youth with pro-Palestinian content.
That's one of the recent things.
Yes.
In the past, they were still worried about them because they're very left-wing, not in favor of the right wing at all, not in favor of corporate rule, and that upsets the corporate Democrats as well. But now they are especially worried about, oh my God, the Chinese are turning the kids in favor of what, decency and humanity and not slaughtering Palestinians?
Yeah, exactly.
If the Chinese were doing that, they'd be doing us a favor, but they're not. In fact, I know because my campaign TikTok page, which is just my personal one, anytime I use that hashtag ceasefire or hashtag free Palestine, they don't serve it to anyone.
Interesting.
So TikTok is actually cheating, in my opinion, based on my experience, on behalf of Israel, not against Israel. So it's just, they want to try to shut down anything, any form of media that is not spewing propaganda.
I mean, look at the Biden administration getting real salty with media outlets for reporting about his age.
Yeah.
Right? And then prior to him getting elected in 2020, shutting down the reposting of that New York Post article on Hunter Biden's laptop. Like, look, the media censorship from political candidates or current political officials is gross, period. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that they're kind of hiding the real reason why they want to shut TikTok down. I don't think they're genuinely concerned about national security. We could be wrong about that, but I don't know, we'll see.
Well, I mean, both guys took massive national security secrets home. Now they're telling us they care about national security because TikTok's hurting their feelings. But meanwhile, Joe Biden started a TikTok channel. So
I know,
which side are you on, brother?
I know.
But now let's get to the hypocrisy of Trump.
So with that said, back in 2020, Donald Trump did attempt to ban TikTok unilaterally through an executive order, but that was actually blocked by the courts after TikTok sued. And so in that rambling video that we showed you in the beginning of the story, he keeps talking about Congress failed, I almost did it, but Congress failed. No, you failed because you tried to do a TikTok ban through an executive order, and that just didn't hold muster when it was brought before the courts, and the courts blocked it. Congress has tried to pass a TikTok ban in the past, and it has stalled in the Senate. Now, during President Joe Biden's State of the Union address, Trump also warned, if you get rid of TikTok, Facebook and Zuckerschmuck will double their business. I don't want Facebook, who cheated in the last election, doing better. They are a true enemy of the people. That's what he claimed.
A real quick comment on that. Facebook isn't cheating against Trump at all.
What he's
complaining, no, it does mean something. What he's complaining about is in 2016, Facebook let fake news from the Trump team run wild. And in 2020, they shut it down. I think that they overreacted, but they did not allow the fake news that Trump normally does to get disseminated on Facebook. And that's why he's livid, because they wouldn't cheat on his behalf.
So let's get to Andrew Ross Sorkin on CNBC asking Trump about his change of heart.
And yet it appears that you've now reversed your view on banning TikTok. Why is that?
So I had it done. And then Congress said, well, they ultimately usually fail. They are like extremely political, and they're extremely subject to people called lobbyists who happen to be very, very talented, very good, and very rich, because it's a tough decision to make. Frankly, there are a lot of people on TikTok that love it. There are a lot of young kids on TikTok who will go crazy without it. There are a lot of users. There's a lot of good, and there's a lot of bad with TikTok. But the thing I don't like is that without TikTok, you can make Facebook bigger. And I consider Facebook to be an enemy of the people, along with a lot of the media.
That rambling answer was reminiscent of a student who was sleeping in class getting called on by the teacher. Like, yeah, I mean, it's because I almost got it done. It's just Congress, they're very political in Congress. What? Okay, that was such a bad answer.
If you almost got it done, why aren't you now insisting on getting it done now? Why have you reversed direction 100%?
Right.
That's the question, and you never answered it because the real answer is devastating.
So it turns out that there is a main lobbyist who owns a 15% stake in TikTok, and homeboy does not want a TikTok ban because it's gonna hurt his return on investment. So there's another element to this story that's worth knowing about, and it's the fact that Kellyanne Conway is doing lobbying work on behalf of TikTok. Kellyanne Conway, the former senior Trump aide, is being paid by the conservative Club for Growth to advocate for TikTok in Congress and has had at least 10 meetings with lawmakers in recent months about the app. Now let's get to that billionaire investor that Donald Trump is trying to court as a campaign donor. Billionaire investor and Club for Growth donor Jeff Yass holds a 15% stake in TikTok's parent company, ByteDance. Club for Growth leaders have been vocal opponents of moves to ban TikTok. Club for Growth president David McIntosh has been in meetings on the Hill with Conway about the issue, according to one of the people familiar with the meetings. And so former President Donald Trump praised Yass as fantastic when they were both at a Club for Growth retreat as the presumptive Republican nominee courts Yass to help his presidential campaign. Shortly after the meeting, Trump wrote the Truth Social post on Thursday saying, if you get rid of TikTok, Facebook and Zuckerschmuck will double their business.
Yeah, so that's basically the real answer at CNBC would have been, well, I was trying to ban TikTok, but then Yaz came in and offered me millions and millions of dollars to keep it. And I thought, Yaz queen.
Oh my God.
That would have been the answer. So guys, I love this story, not just because it's about Trump or TikTok, etc., because it shows you how Washington actually works. And buried within Trump's answer was one piece of truth, which is these lobbyists, they run everything. And it turns out the lobbyist that runs everything in this case is Kellyanne Conway, who was of course a top ally of Donald Trump. And she tells them, this guy's gonna give you millions. And all of a sudden he turns right around. You see that? He never wanted to drain the swamp. He just wanted the corruption to head in his direction.
Even Steve Bannon called him out on it. And Cenk, will you do the honor of reading the last graphic?
Yes, the connection between Yaz and TikTok did not go unnoticed by former Trump campaign manager and White House advisor Steve Bannon, who suggested in a social media post of his own that Yaz's deep pockets was behind Trump's newfound appreciation for TikTok. Bannon shared an Axios article titled, quote, "Inside Trump's TikTok flip-flop," and added, simple, Yaz coin. Drums, when Steve Bannon's calling you out for corruption, wow, you must be incredibly corrupt. And that's exactly what this TikTok reversal is about. All right, guys, we have an amazing bonus episode for just the members. So sign up right now, we need the members, and you get all this extra content. So hit the join button below on YouTube or tyt.com/join, and we'll see you there in a second.
Like extremely political.